Michael, great to see you. Thank you for joining us. Well, good to see you, gentlemen. Taking on the British deep state. We've heard from David about the constitutional restoration that's needed, fixing it all from a kind of 30,000-foot view of what needs to be done. But I'm joined by a couple of gentlemen who I think have seen the British deep state at the coalface. So I want to use this session to spell out some examples of how we know organs, institutions, the government machinery, the judicial machinery, the infrastructure of our governance has gone badly wrong. And Stephen, I'm going to start with you. Tell us about the legal profession and the judiciary. So we've just heard from David that we've sort of politicized the judiciary. To that extent, you can't blame them. I mean, if you're going to insist that they make decisions about equal pay or what constitutes a private and family life to stay in the country, or whether drilling in the North Sea might breach some environmental principle, we've deliberately politicized them, and unsurprisingly, they will make political decisions. But what is your experience from your background as a barrister? What is the legal profession and the judiciary now like in tooth and claw, and what needs to be done to fix it if there is a problem?
So the real problem is that we've had, I mean, yes, they have been thrust into politics. Two ways that has happened, you know, David articulated well. You know, we have asked them to answer political questions, and that fundamentally politicizes the judges. So if you want to depoliticize the judges, you stop asking them political questions. And that, you know, that's human rights, and that's a lot of planning and environmental laws. But alongside that, we have also actively politicized the way in which they are recruited. So I will always be the barrister Steven Barrett. I've not got sod's hope in hell of becoming Steven Barrett KC. Because to become a KC, I have to demonstrate as part of the form, to fill in, it's a massive bloody form. They all spend thousands of pounds on consultants to guide them through this ridiculous form. But at part of the form, one of the 6 core competencies is showing your commitment to DEI. Now, I could do that because I ran a charity for 14 years, and my kids were as diverse as they come. But I'm not doing that because that's politics. And why the hell, what has that got to do with whether or not I'm any good as a barrister? What has it got to do with whether or not I'm any good as a lawyer? And you know what? If you want to become a judge, yep, same criteria applies. So for 20 years, all those KCs, all those judges at every level have to demonstrate their commitment. And then, do you know what? Some of them want to be promoted, which I have no problem with this. I consider this, I feel a lot of them probably desperately angry at me already already I've damned myself. But I have no problem with their ambition. Some of them want to be promoted. Good. People should be ambitious. I'm pro-ambition in life. That's a great thing. But in order to get promoted, they also then have to demonstrate their commitment to DEI. And from my point of view, Mark, that's where a lot of the perverse decisions are coming from, particularly in immigration.
I'll bring in Michael in just a minute, but just to follow up on that point, do you think the underlying problem here is that we are pretending that certain things are settled when they're not? So that DEI issues are actually controversial political issues, but the powers that be would like us to think, no, it's finalised, we've worked out exactly what equality is. Net zero, similarly. No, there's no, the debate's settled here. You would be crazy if you thought anything else. So we're trying to sort of take the politics out of politics. We're pretending these matters are settled and then embedding them into the law. Sort of, what reasonable person wouldn't sign up to an entire DEI code, Stephen? Are you some kind of Nazi? You know, is that where we've got to?
It is where we've got to, and when I started out in public life, speaking a bit more openly and honestly, about 6 years ago, I really tried to get that message across, that the word that they have broken, because lawyers are fundamentally about defining words, that's what we do, you know, and the definition that they have broken is the word political. Okay, 9 times out of 10, if something is called political in this country, in public, it almost always means now something controversial. And by something controversial, it means something that isn't explicitly left-wing. That is, just as a lawyer, that irritates me. Not as a right-wing person, not with my own politics, just as a lawyer. That irritates me because that is broken. That is not the definition of what political is. And so instead what they've done is they've broken that definition and they've used it, they've turned it into a smear word to insult and demean any politics that isn't expressly left-wing.
Yep. Now, Michael, let me come to you. You've been hugely successful in the property sector as the founder of Sydney and London Properties. Most people would probably assume that the state doesn't really impinge upon people like you, that it doesn't cause you any difficulties at all. Look how successful you've been, how entrepreneurial you've been. I think you're going to tell us that your life and business experience is a bit difficult, a bit different to that. Tell us how the state has cramped your style in your sector.
My involvement with the deep state was when I was the largest compulsory purchase claimant in history over the properties that I owned in front of Euston Station, which brought me into contact with the whole High Speed 2 affair. And really my contribution to this session on taking on the deep state, which is what I've done for about 10 years, is not relevant to my own position, which I was able to settle, but more to the fact that this scheme was known to be unviable and uneconomic as far back as 2014, 12 years ago, when Sir David Higgins, the chairman of HSD, published a fraudulent report in which he gave the assurance of costs for the national network of 33 billion as being at 95.5% certainty. Where we are today is we have a branch line from Old Oak Common to Curzon Street, which the government, having improperly written off a lot and under sunk costs, is well over 100 billion. And the point is that what we're faced with is a deep state, which is costing the taxpayer untold billions, which we don't have for education, health, and most of all defense, is going into this scheme. And I think it's very important to understand the depth of criminality that the deep state is guilty of. Is that who suffered? The taxpayer in general, of course, but 20,000 people had their homes and business premises taken away from them at a gross undervalue as part of the crooked CPO process for a scheme that isn't worth doing, was never worth doing, and people knew worth doing. Now, who were guilty? The ministers? Yes. Successive Tory administrations, starting with Greensil's inside man, David Cameron, Boris protecting the constituencies in the north, and now the Labour Party, who both in opposition and under Heidi Alexander and her predecessor, the lady who couldn't find her phones, have been pursuing this hopeless thing. And now we come to Andy Burnham. Andy Burnham, whose CV shows that he was nothing more than a Soviet party apparatchik and couldn't get an interview for a middle management job. His first policy announcement, can you imagine, the first policy announcement was not to stop this long-running fraud, but to continue it to Manchester. Now this train, which was supposed to be running from Euston today, won't run probably for another quarter of a century, and to Manchester, the best part of half a century. We are talking, if it's to be finished, about £1 trillion. Where is this money coming from? Who do these people think that they can keep on blindsiding? Why can't the public wake up? So the deep state is broken, the deep state is criminal, and we have to do something to stop it. It is primarily left-wing, but it isn't entirely left-wing. The right has to take responsibility for what happened under the successive Tory administrations. But the fact is, the country already broke is facing economic disaster, Agamemnon, and this train The gravy train to nowhere is a prime example.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I mean, Michael, I find the HS2 scandal so interesting because it is on the very high end of preposterous spending. I mean, you can look across almost any government department and find ludicrous waste that, you know, we've spent 50 quid buying a light bulb or something, or sourcing paper clips at 10 times market price. But you are looking at eye-watering amounts of money for HS2 in order to get to Birmingham 12 minutes faster than we otherwise would have done. You're right about the budgeting of it. I can remember at the Institute of Economic Affairs when the initial costings came out, we piled in and said, well, it's not going to cost 33 billion, it's going to cost a lot more than that, and we put a number on it. And a couple of years later, we issued an apology because the number that we had put on it was a gross underestimate of what even the government was then saying it would cost. Why, Michael, do you think this madness gets off the ground? I genuinely don't think, having said to Stephen that I want us to accept things that are contestable and that we argue about them in politics and decide them democratically. But I cannot now imagine any remotely sane person on planet Earth arguing that HS2 is a value for money project. So how on earth do you think we got here?
We got there by, well, the way you know how we got there is look who benefited. The supply chain. The major companies like Balfour Beatty, Deloitte's owe nearly $1 billion in fees. And look at what they did to keep this thing going. And look at who they probably paid off. The decision makers in government and the civil service. All who lied to Parliament. Nusrat Ghani went into Parliament in 2019 and said it's going to cost 53 billion. I mean, within months, Alan Cook, the new chairman of HS2, said 80. Within another 3 months, Oakervey, the non-independent chairman, said 106. It is the deep state. It's Meg Hillier, it's Clifton Brown, the committee members who wouldn't take the truthful evidence. It's everybody in the deep state.
Stephen, this is fascinating. I always tend to lean into cock-up theory over conspiracy theory. I think those of us on the right-hand side of the political ledger also tend to assume that our political opponents are misguided but not necessarily malign. Our political opponents think we're all wicked and evil, not merely misguided. So my general approach to the state and state screw-ups and overspending and the rest of it and wokery is I sort of roll my eyes and sort of think, oh, God, not that again, you know, it's all incompetent. Some of it may even be well-intentioned. But from what Michael said, I'm wrong, aren't I? The deep state isn't just frivolous and wasteful. Is it actually corrupt?
Well, it does look that way, yes. I mean, you know, we have to start calling spades spades. I'm a great forgiver of human nature. So, I mean, I tend to think that if I took a punnet of strawberries and left it in my garden today, when I got home, it wouldn't be there. And that's because of how nature is. You know, the birds, whatever, they would take advantage of the free food. I wouldn't be defending it. I wouldn't be protecting it. It wouldn't be behind locks and keys. It wouldn't be safe. It wouldn't be in my fridge, you know? And that's all that happens with humans. We really are no different. And I also like to pretend that I might not be completely thick. So I obsess about words and ideas, and I convinced myself that what we needed to fix in Britain was the word impartiality. And then I met somebody who's actually extremely bright, who's called Liz Truss, and she convinced me that I'm wrong. And the word we need to fix, the primary, most important word, and she's right and I am wrong, is accountability. We need to have an accountability system back. We have almost no accountability in our country. So that's, thank you. That is the equivalent of leaving a punnet of strawberries in your garden and expecting them to be there when you get back. They're not going to be. When you have an unaccountable state, when the state is deliberately structured to deny accountability, don't be surprised that you're getting ripped off. That's just what humans are gonna do. And it doesn't matter whether they're left-wing or right-wing. That's just what humans do. We all have front doors with locks on for a reason. You know, the state has not got that structure. We have a completely unaccountable state. Take the example of our friend Graham Linehan, who was arrested by the Metropolitan Police wrongly over a stupid tweet. He gets paid 25K. Who paid for that? Did the Metropolitan Commissioner pay for that? Did the idiot sergeant who signed off on the arrest pay for that? No, we paid for that. We have an unaccountable state. We must get accountability back.
Michael, I wholly agree with what Stephen has said there. And it is extraordinary, and I think this is almost a peculiarly British problem, isn't it? How many heads have rolled at HS2? I mean, even if one puts aside your views about how dodgy the whole thing is, simply by overrunning a budget by that amount, you would be fired in the private sector. You would be struck off, and you would find it difficult to get another job in anything like that sector. Why do you think it is heads don't roll when things go wrong? Because I'm with Stephen and Liz Truss that that's an absolutely necessary feedback loop and incentive system.
Because they are all part of a Ponzi scheme, and the essential part of a Ponzi scheme is it can't stop because the people who started it then get exposed, like Madoff, like Enron, like Watergate. It's the cover-up syndrome. So when people like Mark Thurston, who appeared on the same Panorama program as me in 2018 and denied the true figures which me and some of the whistleblowers were given, when he left, he got a job with one of the water companies, can you believe? Which is an equally hopeless situation, which is ruining our country. Over 1,000 NDAs have been signed by people who've been taken out of HS2 as a quid pro quo for getting compensation and a job somewhere else. A lady called Karen Campbell, who was a director of HS2, made the mistake of telling me that the bid for Euston, of which, wearing a different hat, I was one of the 3 bidders, had been fixed by a civil servant called Tom Venner with Lend-Lease, in order that he should get a job which he subsequently got involved in it with Euston. There is an aftercare service for these people. No heads will roll. There is no accountability. Now, the British Constitution has one method and one method alone where members of the public can get a debate in the House of Commons, and that is the petition Westminster Hall system. So we got a petition of well over 100,000 people, and we got a debate. Both political parties, Conservatives under Boris, Labour under Keir Starmer, opposed the debate, which called for a full hearing in the House of Commons in the chamber. By some miracle, we won the debate. There's never been that debate in the House of Commons. So you can see that the whole thing is a fix from beginning to end. The police, Lisa Ostrovsky and the current commissioner of the police refused to investigate a fraud of over 100 billion because it was political, because their political masters wouldn't do it. So they, Lisa Ostrovsky and the commissioner of the Metropolitan Police, should face investigation and potential charges of perverting the course of justice and accessory to fraud and breach of their public duty. But it won't happen. It doesn't happen.
Stephen, what is to be done then to bring back accountability? Because I'm fascinated by Michael's analysis, but I share his rather grim diagnosis that this will just keep going. We will all continually be fleeced. These people won't be held to account. What's the overarching solution to all of this? How do we reset it? Does there need to be a grand day of reckoning? Are you willing to be the witch-finder general to round up all the people who need to be answerable for their crimes? What do we do that actually resets the way the governance of our country functions, such that you've got accountability, democracy, not punishment beatings? There's a danger we could go for that, but justice.
So we live in the Gordian knot, right? I need everybody to be familiar with that tale. It's what happens when a human society becomes unnecessarily complicated, excessively complex, far too many laws. I mean, the Romans knew about this. You know, the greater the number of the laws, the more the tyranny. That's what we live in, this massive rat's nest of laws. You actually have to be really quite gifted as a lawyer just to grasp most of it. I mean, a great deal of the lawyers who go along with this are only doing it because they're actually terrified of how complicated the system is, and they don't want to admit how terrible it is. But that's just the Gordian knot, all right? Human societies solve the Gordian knot one of two ways. They either reform themselves, delete their law, and fix their legal system through a democratic process, or Alexander the Great comes along and he cuts your Gordian knot in half. That's what Hitler did in the Weimar Republic. We will solve this the same way humans always solve this, either through concentrated, complex, well thought out, and well-guided reform, or a dictator will come. And if I'd said that 10 years ago, you would have all said that I was being hysterical and ridiculous. But I think now I can say this in public because I think you know it will come. And I don't want a dictator in this country, so we're going to have to fix ourselves the complicated way. We're going to actually have to reform our society on a fundamental basis in order to get an accountable state back. And yeah, I do think there are going to be trials. I really do. And I look at the people who are in the elite right now, and I sort of almost pity them sometimes. We don't even need new offences. We've got misconduct in public office. That carries life imprisonment. We've got contempt of Parliament, which is an offence I think we will see resurrected in due time. That has an almost limitless punishment because it's whatever Parliament says the punishment should be. I think we will use these things. I think they will be deployed against people who are currently see themselves as elite, because there is a lot of corruption and a lot of wrongdoing going on, and human society, we cannot tolerate that forever. And the real kicker, I had a young historian do some demographic research on who voted for Hitler. The real do you want to know the median voter for Hitler in the Weimar Republic? It was a young Protestant mum, and she did it because she was terrified for her kids. Okay, we're just a socialized ape. We too will become terrified of the safety of our kids, and that's what will spur revolution in this country. That's what will spur us to take dramatic steps. I would rather we did it through concentrated, well-thought-out legal reform.
Very interesting. And Michael, do you fear that as well, that we seem incapable of fixing anything? And are you worried that our politics is still revolving around not even moving the deck chairs on the Titanic, just moving who's sitting in the deck chairs on the Titanic? So certainly the Labour Party's pitch at the last election was, if you just kick out the people with the blue rosettes who are terrible and put in the people with red rosettes who are very nice, everything will start working again. And there's a danger that that tactic will now be used with those in blue or teal rosettes, just to say, well, Starmer was terrible, Andy Burnham's going to be even worse, get rid of that bunch of personnel and put us in. But the system will continue to dysfunction unless there is some sort of grand reset of everything and a radical agenda by the next incoming government. We'll just be playing pass the parcel while everything gets worse, and the personnel changes, as I say, with the sort of rapidity of Italian governments in the 70s and 80s.
Well, I agree with everything that Stephen said. The only issue, I think, is that the party system doesn't seem to deliver the solution, as you've just referred to. I mean, we are facing a communist government, a government that is adopting exactly the same principles which are theoretically Marxist but are actually a Soviet, which means that the rich will either be fleeced or have left, and the poor, which according to someone will always be with us, will be taking more and more, and there'll be less and less for them to take. So I don't know what happens, whether it's revolution or dictatorship. Essentially, I think the only solution I can see is that the electorate, before it is Islamically dominated by the uncontrolled immigration that we're facing, actually pays attention to who's standing as an MP and doesn't want to have people who've never had a wealth-producing job like the Chancellor or Angela Rayner or or those sort of people, but find someone who can create wealth and elects them. We need pragmatic people. We need people who know how to create wealth for the rest of the world, who are genuinely publicly minded. And that they've got to elect those people almost irrespective of party, but it would seem that they're more likely to be towards the right than they are towards to be the left. But as we stand here, indebted beyond measure, we are doing what we're doing on borrowed money from abroad. Our credit is at its limit. The pound is set for a collapse. And Andy Burnham, such policies as he's ventured, but he hasn't ventured many, and he's not been elected by anybody except the people of Macclesfield, and he wasn't elected to number 10, he was elected for Macclesfield. We are in an undemocratic system, and if we survive to a next election, or we cause a snap election, then the electorate have to take their responsibility both to vote and to vote for people, to hope that people will be standing who are worth electing.
Stephen, how do you see this challenge that, ultimately, to fix this, ultimately, you need a political party or an alliance of political parties that will win a general election on a manifesto that they intend to carry out, ultimately. But is it therefore the task, because the purpose of this conference is not just for us to get together and have some interesting discussions and a good time, but to begin to create a conservative movement that can help bring this about? Do you think we need to hitch ourselves to one particular political party at the moment and try and bend it in this direction? Or do you think there's intellectual groundwork that needs to be done on sort of drafting what the laws might be, or more storytelling that needs to be done, exposing these sort of things in the media or on social media? What are the next steps? And again, I asked David Starkey, what should people in this room do to attempt to bring that about? Because I think the default position in the past has been pick the political party that's most aligned to you, join it, deliver loads of leaflets, knock on loads of doors, and hope that's enough. But I'm not sure we're in that world anymore.
No, we're definitely not. I think we are in the last chance saloon, I'm afraid to say. What I think people should do is cry out for this, call for major substantive reform, call for people who have drafted legislation, who know what they're doing from day one. Call for it, and the politicians will move over to you. They do here. They're not politicians are an odd lot, and I'm not here to defend them, but they will adapt. And if more of the public are calling for it, that's why what you did with David Starkey, going around the country, getting people to call for it, talk about it, mention it to them, write to them, get it in front of their minds that this is what you want because you want to save your country from a future dictator, then call for it. The other thing I would say, just as a closing message, is I want to warn people to beware the tinkerers. We are not getting out of this by tinkering. One of the major problems we have right now is that there's an entire field of profession, an entire job category called policy people. Right, policy people are tinkerers. They have a vested interest in the state remaining exactly how it is and them changing it maybe 1% this way and 1% that way and, ooh, look, I've tweaked that knob there. They have no interest in getting rid of this entire complex machine, and that's what we have to do. So just as my closing message to you all, please, beware tinkerers. They will not help us.
And Michael, your closing message, what needs to be done? Stephen says, beware the tinkerers, we need a much fuller surgery than that, and it would be a deceit, really, to believe that we could... it would be a deceit to believe that we could fix things just by fine-tuning something here or turning a little dial there. What's your message to these people at this inaugural CPAC GB conference? What can they do to move the dial?
I think Stephen is entirely right, and I agree with him. But it is the responsibility of every citizen in this country to recognize how bad things are the corruption of their leaders. Why is everything staying the way it is? Because they have a vested interest in it. And therefore, it is really, really important for the electorate to be aware, and for some people within our society, I'm an old man, so I can't do it anymore, but for younger people, it's not a question of left and right, it's a question of pragmatism. It's a question of success. You know, we hear a lot about the phrase working class. I don't know what they define working class as. I started life off as a £6 a week articled clerk. That's all I had apart from my parents, apart from a very good education. And everything I achieved because I got up at 5 o'clock in the morning. Now, I've got human nature like everybody else. I'm quite prepared to pay my price in society, but I'm not prepared, under the abolition of the 2-cap rule, to pay for an unmarried woman who has 7 children from 5 different men, 3 of whose names she can't remember. That is not going to produce a solution. We must take moral family responsibility, and we've got to pick our leaders differently.
Stephen, Michael, thanks so much. Some really interesting insights into the deep state. I think a sobering view of the scale of challenge that we have got. And I hope for you in the audience, some inspiration that our call to arms can fix it. Michael Gross, Steven Barrett, thank you so much.